Olivia, could you remind our listeners first, please, as to who ActionAid are?
Hi Darren, thanks for having me. ActionAid are an international social justice federation. So we work across the world with the most marginalised and vulnerable people, and we work to help them find their own solutions to poverty and lift themselves out of poverty. Here in Ireland, we campaign, we fundraise, and we have some programmes, and we also support programmes in a number of overseas countries, and particularly around women's rights and through our child sponsorship programme.
And how many countries are you active in? When did you start in Ireland?
We've been in Ireland since 1983, so we've been here for quite a long time. The Federation is in many countries. We have ActionAid in about 45 countries globally, but we also respond to humanitarian situations. So depending on the need around the world, that can change in any given year. But 45 or so. And we're actually one of the only international organisations to be headquartered in the Global South. So we've gone on a journey here in Ireland and globally since 1983. And we took a conscious decision to shift power within the organisation and make sure that we're led by the people who are lifting themselves out of poverty and by the South. So our headquarters are in South Africa, and a lot of our leadership comes from the developing world.
Okay, we're here today to talk about Palestine. I saw news in the media last week about Palestine. ActionAid work in Palestine. Could you tell us a bit about your organisation's involvement in and for Palestine, please? And could you tell me what was the anniversary you were marking last week?
Yeah, of course. ActionAid has worked in Palestine for a number of years and in a number of ways. We work on the ground with communities there in campaigning, in supporting their livelihoods and access to justice. And internationally, we also work in solidarity with the people living on the ground there and the human rights violations they face. This year is of particular significance because it's unfortunately, it marks 50 years of Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territory. So it's been 50 years since the Six-Day War. It also marks 10 years since the blockade has been imposed, and that blockade means that there is no access. Palestinian people have no access by land, sea or air to outside of the territories, and it really constitutes a collective punishment of the citizens of Gaza. That's 1.9 million people who are blockaded within that territory. So that's very, very significant. And it's 100 years since the Balfour Declaration. And so it's a year of unfortunate anniversaries that really identify a long-term abuse of Palestinian people's human rights, and a really important occasion for people all over the world to come together in international solidarity. I think now is the moment where we really need to put our feet and our minds behind action to support Palestine and support Palestinian people's human rights.
Yeah, I understand that there was a march in town last Saturday. You were at the march. Could you tell us about it, please?
Yeah, so it was a national demonstration organised by the Irish Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And it brought together lots of organisations, a lot of trade unions, organisations like ourselves, grassroots activists from across Ireland. And we were joined by Palestinian women who had travelled over to speak at the event, and a number of policymakers here. And it was a beautiful day on Saturday, which was fantastic. So we marched from O'Connell Street right up to the Israeli embassy, and then we had some talks outside. And it was a very positive march. It was really about standing in solidarity with Palestinian people and demanding justice for them.
Have you ever been to Palestine yourself?
I haven't. It's somewhere I hope to go. I've never visited, so I'd really like to see that.
What is your ActionAid's analysis of the conflict there and occupation? You don't have to go into too much detail if you don't want to, but go on.
Well, it's a really good question, and I suppose maybe to tell you a little bit, I can give a little bit of background. And ActionAid, we really take sides with vulnerable people in the fight against poverty and the fight for justice, which is why we have been working in Palestine since 2007. And the situation in Palestine is one that is a military occupation. of the Palestinian territory. And under international law, and I won't get too technical, but under international human rights law, an occupying power has a responsibility to respect and promote the human rights of the people under their occupation. And that hasn't been the case for Palestinian people. And that really means that they have suffered human rights abuses through the blockade, but also through the illegal settlements, Israeli illegal settlements across the territories, and the restriction of movements, the restriction of goods, the inability to have land for agriculture. So the people day to day are in a really, really dire situation, which is what has meant that ActionAid works there. And I can give you an example if you like. So maybe, and some of the people listening may have already come across this. This is a story I shared before the march, because people were really curious about what it's really like living in the occupied territories. So I shared Fawzia's story, and Fawzia is a woman that ActionAid have worked with. And Fawzia lives in Gaza. She had a farm, and her primary source of income was agriculture, and that's a really difficult life for many people in Gaza because huge amounts of land have been claimed by the Israeli military. So more than 40% of the land that used to be available to Palestinian people to make money on and earn their livelihoods has been withdrawn, and they no longer can access that. It's a huge challenge. But actually, Fawzia's farm was bombed in 2014, and her family had to flee their home. And her son had been attacked by Israeli military in 2012, so he has a very significant disability as a result of that, and he can't really walk. He has limited mobility. And immediately after that, her husband had a stroke, and he's lost mobility in his legs. So she had to try and flee with the family who couldn't move. Since then, she has absolutely no income. She's been living with people, and her son and her husband and herself, she's diabetic. They can't access the medical treatment they need on a regular basis. So in order to access medical treatment, they need to leave the part of Gaza they're in to get to the closest hospital or medical facility. And to do that, you need an exit permit. And OCA, the UN humanitarian affairs body, just this year, or earlier actually, December in 2016, released some figures that showed that 43% of people travelling for medical requirements leaving Gaza didn't have their exit permits granted. So that's almost half of the people who are travelling for essential treatment, chemotherapy and really, really urgent medical requirements are stuck. So Fawzia's stuck now. She has no income. And her family are in a very bad way, and she has no access to her human rights. She has limited mobility, and actually it's come to such a situation that she borrows clothes from people and lives on the generosity of her community and her neighbours who help keep her and her family going.
You are kind of advocating and working on the human rights side of it, not really the politics side of it, no?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, we really want to go beyond the legal and the technical approach and look at the lives of the Palestinian people and what that means. And we really want to support the freedom of the Palestinian people, and we don't have a particular political solution because we believe that that's up to the Palestinian people to determine themselves in a democratic way. We're a non-violent organisation, and we're committed to campaigning for a peaceful solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So we don't condone any violence, but we do see that Palestine has a right to self-determination, and Palestinian people have a right to their human rights. And that's really at the heart of the work we do and what we're asking people to help us support.
Like, what would you say about the Israelis that get killed by Palestinian paramilitaries, though? Like how do I say it? They accept that the situation is complex and that it's not as simple as like Israelis bad, Palestinians good.
I think absolutely. It's a protracted conflict over a very long period of time. It is recognised by the UN and many others under international human rights and international humanitarian law that there has been wrongdoing, and it is a fact that the majority of the people killed in the conflict are Palestinian civilians. So Palestinians have lived under military occupation for 50 years. Their human rights are systematically violated through discriminatory laws and discriminatory practices. They are often detained without trial. They've had their land and property confiscated. Their homes are often demolished. They can't access permits to build. Actually, in 2016, for example, only 11% of permits applied for by Gazan people living in Area C were granted, so they couldn't build homes, even though their homes had been demolished in many cases, or even places of work, shops or tents. So I think it's a complex situation, and the only way to end the violence is to end the military occupation and to stop the injustice and the indignity endured by Palestinians in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem and East Gaza. So really there has to be a solution that supports the Palestinians' human rights, their legal human rights. And that's really at the heart of what we want to see.
Yeah, I know. I think it was the Israeli ambassador said to Ireland a few years ago, said that Ireland is one of the most pro-Palestinian countries in in Europe, if not the world. What are you calling on our listeners to do, and indeed to the Irish government or any other politicians who are listening, Olivia?
That's a really good question, and I think you're really right, Darren, actually. I know we had a vote in our in the Dáil here in Ireland, and there was incredible support for the Palestinian people, and our colleagues in Palestine were so truly moved by the amount of people at the march on Sunday here in Ireland, or Saturday rather, just to see Irish people carrying their flag and caring about the reality that those people are living in every day. I think is really, it means a lot. For us, we really believe that, solidarity is kind of key. So in the last 50 years, the Berlin Wall has fallen. Apartheid has ended in South Africa, but the military occupation of Palestine has continued. And none of these things, these positive things, would have happened without support and action from the international community. And the situation won't change unless we here in Ireland and people all over the world mobilise and show support for Palestine's self-determination and for Palestinian people's human rights and access to justice. ActionAid is working in Palestine with Palestinian people, and here in Ireland we're supporting in solidarity, and we'd welcome anyone who's interested in getting involved to contact us through our website. It's www.actionaid.ie. And on there you'll find, we regularly update with blogs and stories, so you can hear from real women and real men and children living in Palestine and what their lives are like, which I think gives you a real picture of, of the situation. So please go online, let us know if you'd like to support and get involved in the Solidarity Action. We'd be really pleased to hear from anyone.
Okay, Olivia, it was great talking to you. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Darren.